I think one of the most valuable things in the book is that early on, she says, that it's not just enough to let them. We also have to see where when we let other people do what they're going to do, it's all about letting me. It's giving yourself that personal power and permission. And so the first point is really this emotional peace and personal power that comes with let them. And so it's really about liberating yourself from that need, desire, and let's face it, exhaustion of trying to control others, and instead really think about embracing emotional peace.
Welcome to the Sober Edge podcast, inspiration for alcohol-free living. I'm your host, Teri Patterson, functional nutritionist and This Naked Mind senior coach. The Sober Edge is a place to explore the infinite possibilities on the other side of drinking. In a culture soaked in booze, discover the wonder and joy of taking a different path. Meet real people living lives of purpose and passion. Learn the truth behind the alcohol myths and get ready to be motivated, inspired, and astounded by what is possible with the Sober Edge.
Well, hey everyone, it's Teri back with another edition of the Sober Edge podcast. And this is a solo episode, but I have some really cool guests coming up at the end of the month. So I'm excited to talk to some really inspirational people who I think you are going to love. But for today, we're going to have a pseudo conversation with Mel Robbins as I share a little bit about her new book, The Let Them Theory. I was very intrigued about this book because I find that for many of us in our alcohol-free journey, there are so many things we're holding on to, areas where we have regret, where we find it difficult to let go of past mistakes or situations that we got entangled with when we were drinking and over drinking. And also the idea of how setting boundaries and or allowing things versus controlling things might be so valuable when it comes to embracing this alcohol-free life, not only with presence, but with joy and ease. Because really, isn't that the point? I often, when I was still drinking, and it's almost been 10 years for me, but if I go back 10 years, one of the things that kept me hooked on drinking was the fact that I thought, I called it a fact, but it's not a fact. The story in my head is that I would be miserable not drinking. And so I stayed hooked into that thought process. And instead of exploring how I might shift into a place where not only would my life look different, but it would be powerfully enriched. And so the let them theory has been really cool to dive into. And so I want to connect a few of the dots for you. I do recommend the book. I think that it is much more than quote unquote pop psychology, as I thought it might be. I thought it might be a little personal development light. And I think it can be on first read or glancing through it. I want to invite you to go deeper. And that's what we're going to do together today, because I actually think that there's some really powerful magic in this let them theory. And she calls it a life changing tool. And I think it really is, because if you've been following along with me at any time, I think it was in 2022, my word of the year was allow. And that was really tough. Like, how do you allow things to unfold, allow people to be the version of themselves they want to be without trying to control it? I think when I realistically look at my past life prior to my alcohol-free life, my first 55 years, or certainly 20 of those years as a mom and, woman in the workforce who was, doing all the things, juggling all the things, I really desired control. I thought that was the key. And so the idea of let them is unique and not so unique. So let's unpack a little bit of this today. And really, I want to talk about how, as we explore living alcohol free, how we can make this exciting and how we can relinquish control and yet show up as our most authentic person. So I think one of the most valuable things in the book is that early on, she says, that it's not just enough to let them. We also have to see where when we let other people do what they're going to do, it's all about letting me. It's giving yourself that personal power and permission. And so the first point is really this emotional peace and personal power that comes with let them. And so it's really about liberating yourself from that need, desire, and let's face it, exhaustion of trying to control others, and instead really think about embracing emotional peace. And so what she actually says is when you let them do whatever it is they want to do, it creates more control and emotional peace for you. And the reason is it's because we pretend we have control of over other people, but the reality is we don't. And so when we're hooked on this idea of control and trying to coerce or force or persuade or manipulate even other people into behaving the way we want them to or responding the way we want or reacting to us the way we want them to, there is a lot of places where we really are abdicating that emotional piece. We are pretending we have control, but instead, what's happening is we are hooked on the outcome. So, this mindset shift is really about letting go of what's not yours to manage and focusing on, what you can control, your own emotions and actions. And so, as we pursue this alcohol free lifestyle, it's so transformative because we don't have to get stuck on what other people's opinions are or what society expects of us or our friend group. And instead, we get to really go on this inward journey of, of focusing on and reflecting on and considering what does health, clarity, and joy look like for me? And so, one of the ways we can really let go and let them is let go of people having opinions about whether you're drinking or not drinking or what's in your glass. I know this sounds so simple, but it's not necessarily easy. It's simple to have, a response like, I used to drink or I no longer drink. But sometimes the expectations we have that people are going to respond in a way that makes us feel uncertain. We create so much of this in our own mind. So, really just separating the let them and let me. And what I think is when we let them have their opinions about whether we're drinking or not, what we let ourselves do is make that empowered choice. And the second way is really this idea of balanced responsibility. And this goes more into the let me. And so, what I think is so important to share is that in the book, Mel Robbins does a great job that this isn't an excuse for inaction. Because, some people without reading the book might just be like, yeah, right. Well, I'm just going to let everybody do whatever they want, walk all over me, or, ruin the environment or raise their children however the heck they want, whatever, but that is such a cop out. And this is not. This is actually that beautiful place of balanced responsibility. So it's not an excuse for inaction. Instead, it's actually a key part of how this let them theory works. It's the let me, as I mentioned. So in other words, you may accept that you can't control others, but if you're still fully responsible for how you respond, react, and move forward. And isn't that a sense of freedom, right? And for those of us that are in this, very unique place of living alcohol free, this is where the gold is because once you release the stress of managing others and their views about whether or not you're drinking, then instead you can really focus actively by choosing what supports you. And this is where we can go deeper into our journey. Once we move all the noise out of the way and we realize that the let me means that I get to ask the questions of myself rather than letting other people question what I'm doing. I get to build my life based on my authentic version, my integrity, my forward motion, not what anybody else thinks is right for me. And that brings a lot of responsibility. One of the phrases I heard early on in my coach training was drinking is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And I think this is the way it goes with maybe trying to control other people or this illusion of control is that, it's not anyone's fault that they get caught or hooked into this trap of trying to control other people or maybe thinking we can or wanting it because it's kind of how the game is rigged. But we can take responsibility for ourselves and then we don't need to worry what's happening on their side of the street. And so another part that I really like is there's three powerful applications to this sort of let them theory, right? Detachment, letting others fail, and letting them be themselves. And so with detachment all of this is adjacent to boundaries work. And I think boundaries are so key. And we have to remember that the boundaries are about us. There are boundaries. We can't put boundaries on other people because then we go back into that place of trying to control. So, detachment is that we step away emotionally from what others do or think. And this allows us to reclaim our own peace, our own voice. I know when I was a young bride, I got married, I was barely 22. And for a long part of my life, I just kind of was enmeshed in what other people were doing or thought or, the friends that we hung around with, my influence from my parents, my husband. I just kind of went along to get along. And so really claiming my own voice and then letting others fail. This is hard, particularly if you have adult children, teenagers, or anyone in your life who's struggling with their own alcohol use disorder or any addiction. Because we we pretend or imagine that we have some sort of sway. And it's really powerful to let others do what they're going to do. And so, the consequences that come from their actions, we don't have to be so attached to that. And, where we can move is we can take a step back from being the fixer, the people pleaser, the good girl, into that role of just letting people create their own resources. Ask for help. It doesn't mean we walk away from people, but it means that we understand that we are not here to persuade, convince, manipulate people. And so then the other is let them be themselves. Accept people as they are instead of trying to mold them to what your ideal is or what you would like them to be. And I think we practice this all throughout our life. Sometimes we have to let go of our parents showing up in certain ways, let go of our children, let go of our spouse doing it that way. And there's so much freedom in this opportunity to say, like, hey, they're just wired that they're never going to do X or they're always going to do Y. And when we stop fighting against that, that's how we get back to that peace. And so much of the work we do on the other side of not drinking is or the other side of drinking is this emotional sobriety work. And this is what it's all about, understanding that, you know, the most joyful place to be is in a relationship where we're not trying to control someone, letting them be themselves and accepting that. And here's the thing, if you can accept that someone is, just being fully them, and it doesn't work for you, you don't want to be in a relationship with them, it's harmful, disrespectful, just not working for you, you get to you get to step away and say, I'm going to accept that this person is always going to, show up this way. And therefore, these are the boundaries I have. Or I choose to walk away from the relationship. That's okay too, right? So there's a lot of self compassion when it comes to not trying to fix other people's reactions to how you're showing up or the changes you're making around alcohol. And we don't have to feel obligated to rescue anyone, by saying, oh, gosh, they feel bad that I'm not drinking, or they bought me, my special wine. I should, in fact, partake just tonight because I don't want to hurt their feelings. Like, we just let go of all of that. And this is a way that we get to honor our path and everyone else's. So, there are some places to walk gently. And one of the things that I really appreciate that Mel Robbins does in her book is she has a resource for parents because, let an adult children face their own consequences looks very different than, a much younger child. So there are a few caveats here. And so there are some situations where you shouldn't just let things slide. And so that could be if there's something actually dangerous going on. And that is a pretty black and white, cut and dried example. Like if somebody has been drinking and they're, let's say your adult child is over drinks at a party and now they're going to put their little one in the car seat and drive away. Like you don't need to let them. That at that point you do get to say, "Hey, I'm going to, intervene." And that's very different than what the let them theory is all about. Another example would be like when you need to show up for yourself, advocate for yourself, call someone out on the things that maybe are not healthy for you in that relationship, then you can, for example, like, if you're being mistreated at work, if somebody is sexually harassing you or there's emotional abuse, of course, that means that, this supersedes the idea of let them. And then, when you've got some really um, strong personal boundaries that are working really well for you, and there's no respect of those boundaries, meaning, those boundaries are for you. And so if you need to walk away from that relationship or say something, of course, that's part of it, right? So, this is the part that I love, that it's not just pop psychology, like, oh, do this thing and all is well and good. And that, there will be nothing but joy and rainbows in your life. No, there's still things in life that get lifey, and there are places that we need to understand that real life goes beyond just let them. But also, again, when we go back to why this works and why it matters, is that it really is helping shift this emotional focus from other people and how they're responding back to ourselves. And I don't know about you, but when I was drinking and over drinking, I wasn't in touch with my emotional self at all. And so this is a time to go inward and to start to reflect on, hey, you know what? I don't have to spend all my time considering what is going on with other people. I can let them show up and do what they do, and I can then focus on me. And that's really an important part of this work that we get to do in this alcohol free life. Um, we also get to let go of some of that mental noise. There was so much noise in my head around drinking, not drinking, the rules I set up around drinking. Just be careful if that was you, that you don't come out of that situation and create a new set of worries, rules, rumination that have to do with other people. Let all that go. And then, also kind of thinking about how this can help us think about boundaries. Because again, boundaries are about you. They're self-care for you. They're a way for you to hold the line of what works for you. Other people get to do what they do, and we get to stand in our own truth. And so this book can really help with some of this grounded areas that we need to focus on and make it easier to feel joyful and aligned in this alcohol free life. So, I really love that this book is out in the world. Like I said, I invite you to take a look at it. I think that there is a simplicity to it, but it really is hitting on something that is so beautiful and necessary and affirming for each and every one of us. And so it's this emotional liberation, which I think is so key. And this is a place where when we are considering becoming alcohol free, newly alcohol free, living and loving our alcohol free life, we want to keep moving into that place of ease, joy, excitement, and letting them and letting me is a beautiful way to practice this. All right. Well, I hope you read the book. Let me know in the comments, the show notes, if you do read the book. I really think there's a lot to take a closer look at here. I think it's a beautiful offering, and I'm thinking of you as I share this information. I hope that you will let them and let yourself show up in ways that light you on fire. All right. Have a beautiful couple of weeks. I'll see you very soon, and get ready for some special guest episodes coming up the end of the month and into September. Take care.
I want to thank you for tuning in to the Sober Edge podcast. This is a place for important conversations and a safe place to question everything you thought you knew about drinking. If you're looking for your sober edge, I want to invite you to connect with me at thesobernutritionist.com, where you can grab my free resource, Becoming More, a guide to loving your sober life. And I would be so grateful if you enjoyed this podcast, if you would leave a rating and review, as it will help more people find their sober edge.